D&D is really fun, but I think it could be even better. So, you've read the title, let's get into it. Remove multi-attack. So hold your horses, I'm not talking about weakening martials at all. I'm talking about replacing multi-attack with something that has more flair and is more interesting than just attacking twice. Multi-attack is really slow and it has few interesting options. I mean, there's grapple and shove, of course, but how many times have you seen your fighter just attack compared to using the other ones? I want martials to have more options, to really be about honing their skills to their utmost extremes and their skills so they can't be matched with. I want them to have epic actions, to really convey the feeling like they spent their entire lives training for just this. By the way, these are not in any order, but it leads very well into the next point, which is remove unnecessary scaling. Consider your dragon just having 50 HP. And no, I'm not talking about weakening anyone or anything. This could work out if the PCs would just deal less damage, but equivalent damage compared to what HP the dragon had before. Calculating with really big numbers is pretty boring and it bogs down gameplay. This one time you deal 200 damage with one strike is pretty cool, I admit. But is it worth all the mental juggling to get there? Some of you have probably played games like Diablo, where you deal damage in the millions, and these numbers are inflated because they feel more epic. But after a time, you don't really consider these numbers to be high, your mind just starts to adjust them back to the baseline level, which is equivalent to how much HP the monster has and how much it takes to kill it. So this isn't really a change, it's just suggesting making the game easier and faster. But here's something where scaling absolutely makes a change, and that's save DCs. These increase a lot from level 1 to 20, and the bonuses that the players get don't increase accordingly, which means that at level 20 a fighter probably has not a good chance to shake off effects that just keep them out of the battle entirely. Even though they have resilience and advantage, their scaling, or the scaling of the DCs, just won't allow them to pass some DCs. This is also very boring from a game design perspective and can feel cheap or unfair. There's also a lot of examples in the game where the lack of scaling is a problem, for example with equipment, and I think the whole math could be overhauled. But let's talk again about players not being able to do stuff with the next point, which is overhauling death saves. And it's not just about me being mean and wanting to make the game harder. It's about players having more agency. Death saves are not very interesting. It's one roll and either something happens on a 20 and the player can act, or the player stays unconscious for the rest of the fight, game, or even dies at some point. I want the game to make effects that take away players' turns to be a lot less common. After all, our players have just their own character, and if they wait for their turn for 5 minutes and they can just make one roll, it's pretty boring. Also with something like death saves, I think there are better ways to convey the feeling of getting worn down by combat. For example, I am a fan of giving players lasting or semi-lasting wounds that just convey the feeling and the narrative of the battle better than your unconscious does. Make resurrection way harder. I already made an entire video about this, so I won't go into detail, but the gist of it is that I want player actions to have meaning, and if they can just be resurrected even if they fail, it takes away from the agency and the meaning of their action. Again, it's not about making the game harder necessarily, it's about having the world make sense. And I also don't want every great evil to have to be banished, or it can be brought back, or some other kind of divine intervention. I just want death to be lasting in my games. Encourage homebrew and DMs more. In the DM's guide of early D&D there was a quote saying that all rules are optional and the DM has total say over which ones to use and which ones won't, and when and where. This is not an excuse to leave out content. I want DMs to have more tools to create their own stuff. and to be supported doing so. In my opinion, Homebrew is the one and only thing that made D&D what it is today and made it so popular. It keeps the game alive and it makes it flexible for many different settings. But don't misunderstand me, rules are important. They create the fundament that we can build upon and something that gives players and DMs a structure to what to expect from the game. So social contract is and stays really important when we are talking about Homebrew. What I want is to have tools to be better able to customize the game, which makes it even easier, even for new DMs, to create balanced Homebrew, for example. Give us frameworks and give us tables. And please, make the D&D Beyond feature for adding Homebrew easier. Make customizing in the new VTT reasonable and not too expensive. And extend the content that third-party developers can use from the game. This is also not just me being greedy, but I want to keep this game alive and thriving. And the more people are creating content, the more alive this game will be. I could make entire videos about each of these points. But for now, these are my 5 wishes. What are yours? Please tell me in the comments. I want to hear what I missed.